Hello and welcome to episode 29 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. How are you today, Brian?
I'm all right. I have a new chair.
Tell me about your chair, because I remember you were sitting on a very uncomfortable surface, because I was there. We used to be, before the pandemic, we were together in your bomb shelter, and you had kitchen chairs from the 1910s, and they were very uncomfortable and very precarious, I might add.
Yeah, but it served the podcast well because, they're so uncomfortable, it kept everything moving in a good clip because you wanted to wrap up the show and get off those horrible chairs.
Unlike now, where I'm in a comfortable chair and I go on in my diatribes for hours and hours, and I'm going to try not to do that this week. I'm going to try and do things better. How was your week? Getting ready for teaching film class over the web. How's that working out?
Yeah, and that's why I have the better chair here, and it's still not a great one. It's my son's cast-off gaming chair, but yeah, I thought since I'm going to be teaching down here, I need something more than the horrible chairs, so it's a slightly less horrible chair. And I got a new hat. My Seattle Kraken hat finally came in the mail.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm officially now a Seattle Kraken fan.
Are you wearing that during the telecast from your basement for the kids?
I'm not, but I'll say yes because it's just audio. Who knows?
All right. Have you got a theme song for your show?
No, I have not done that.
Well, here's one. I'm going to do it on the fly here.
Okay.
Brian's movie class. Brian's movie class. Is he wearing pants? Brian's movie class. Brian's movie. I don't know, something like that. You can use that if you
excellent.
want.
You just came up with that off the top of your head?
Just off the top of my head, yes.
Wow.
Well, I didn't. The music comes elsewhere, but yeah. I think it would really jazz up your class and get people. Film students are notoriously sleepy. Well, all university students are. So this would really get them in the mood if you gave them a big blast. Brian, last week we mentioned Ed Whittingham.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to be the head of the Pembina Institute in Alberta, which looks at the energy industry and improving it for environmental reasons. And then he was a big advisor in the Alberta government. And he's got his own podcast, and I have a clip, so let's listen and talk.
Hello, and welcome everyone to our third live webinar from Quarantine Quarters here in Alberta. My name is Ed Whittingham. I'm a clean energy policy and project consultant.
Two things. First of all, he says Whittingham. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, that's quite striking.
Which makes me think he's not a Whittingham.
Different branch.
He doesn't sound like a Whittingham. He sounds like an Albertan, which is like it has a tinge of cattle in it, sort of a twangy cattle, a Texas sort of Alberta accent. So I don't know. Maybe he was just raised there, and that's the way it worked out for him. But no, I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking I have doubts that he's my relative. But we did have a series of relatives, and he sort of adds up to the right age of somebody who would be one of my half cousins. So we'll see. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
On the show this week, Brian, I want to continue a bit of my talk from last week about the disruption. And this has been very controversial with our listeners. They're not all buying on, and I don't blame them. Mm-hmm. But Tony Seba and his partner at the RethinkX, I gave you the wrong web address last week. It's RethinkX.com. Now, you can spend $40 on the Amazon book, or you can download his book for free. And I did read a lot of it, not the important parts. It's a dry academic read, but very enlightening, and I want to keep coming back to that. It's very interesting. So I found that he was on a BBC documentary on the BBC Radio Business Report. He's been on there a few times, and so has his partner. And I wanted to bring some clips and just talk a little bit more about that this week, and also summarize his recipe for moving forward, given his outlook on disruption on food, agriculture, transportation, and energy, what we should be doing. And guess what? He's not in favor of a carbon tax. He thinks a carbon tax is not necessary, but he also thinks that the governments should get out of subsidizing oil, and I'm sure everyone listening to this show is in agreement with that. But what do you want to talk about this week?
Well, I want to bring back the green energy pet peeves segment,
Okay.
and then a couple of news stories, but I don't have too much in the way of news this week.
Well, I do, and it's going to be a jam-packed show again, kids. We're on YouTube. Check us out, because we're going to try putting some video up there, more video all the time, and maybe even experiment with videoing. I sound like the guy from SCTV, Jerry Todd. We'll be videoing the show. I never understood where he got all that expensive equipment in his home.
Yeah.
Because they're all analog switchers and such, and now you can just do this stuff with a laptop and a couple $100. But anyway, yes, check out our YouTube channel, The Clean Energy Show, and we're on Twitter, Clean Energy Pod. You want to check us out there. We'd like to hear from you on Twitter. A lot of people have spoken to us on Twitter, and we have some of those comments shortly. And then our email is cleanenergyshow, one word, at gmail.com. That's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And we have the SpeakPipe account where you can leave us a voicemail by pushing a button and recording us a message, which we can include on the show. We love that. It's speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. And it is, what is the date today? It's the 8th?
Yeah, September 9th.
September 9th. My kids are going back to school today, so it's weird. It's weird to see kids in the school ground across the street. We'll probably hear them later. So let's get into the show. Brian, you go first.
Well, we were talking about the Lucid car last week, and they have confirmed the price, and it's going to range from $80,000 to $169,000, which is a little better than I thought. It's obviously an expensive luxury car. These are U.S. dollars. But starting at 80 is not too bad. That's kind of in the range of competing with Tesla's higher-end cars.
You know, it isn't too bad, is it? I mean, 80,000, but it goes all the way up to 160,000 U.S., right?
Exactly, yeah.
So it's both good and bad. I mean, that's quite a difference. I mean, my first house cost $50,000.
Yeah.
And my second one didn't cost much more than the full price of the upper end of that car. So, yeah, I don't know what to think about that. It's certainly not a mass car, and that's one thing that we like to talk about on the show is getting EVs to the masses and as quickly as possible. To improve adoption, to get familiarity in the marketplace, and just to get pollution out of the air. So, by the way, Ed Whittingham was on the Twitter bragging that he got 800 comments for that Globe and Mail story that you brought up last week, which was a 3-person op-ed on the oil industry. And what was it about again? Was it about sort of a green recovery type of thing?
I closed the tab, but yeah, it was how we should not be further subsidizing fossil fuels, and if there's going to be subsidies, they should be green. Something like that.
Well, he got 800 comments, and he was bragging about that. And I got 1,000 comments on my CBC op-ed that went national on ending Earth Day a year ago on Earth Day. So the other
Whittingham can suck it.
He can suck it, but you know what, Brian? The man has made a good living all of his life being a clean energy consultant and think tank person. Me? I don't make anything.
We're going to have to start a Patreon or something for the podcast.
Patreon, or we're going to have to start doing product placement. Delicious Pepsi. Or something like that. I don't know. What else could we do? Maybe a home charger or something. We could endorse them.
Yeah. Any sponsors, hit us up.
All right. Well, we'll get to the feedback now. Question from Tweeter Moby. And this came in last night, and I didn't have an answer to it, so I wanted to ask. I said I'd ask on the show, and we would talk about it. I believe Tweeter Moby, according to his profile picture, is a cow with a Twitter account, which is unusual. So being on board for clean energy also means you are on board for plant-based foods. So do you endorse, I mean, what does that mean? Does it mean that, yes, we have to eat plant-based foods if you're going to be a gung-ho clean person, that you have to go and eat the plant-based foods?
No. Well, first of all, I don't think anyone's against plant-based foods. I mean, we all eat plant-based foods now.
Sure.
So I think, yeah, maybe people were just surprised by the leap where suddenly we're a clean energy show and we're talking about plant-based foods, but I think it's all related.
It is related. It's technology. In fact, they're calling it food software because places like Harvard and wherever MIT would be able to design a food and then you could download it to your essentially a brewery type of place, and that's going to take place outside towns where the food is needed, cities where the food is needed. And my son asked me, was asking me about this, and he asked me if wheat would be replaced because he was looking at the climate changes for Canada at the end of his life, say at the end of this century. And he said the only thing you're able to grow where we live is wheat, which is mostly what we grow now. But the changes will eliminate other crops, according to his research.
I saw a really good documentary on CBC a while ago. I believe it's on the GEM site. I wish I could remember the name of the series, but they profiled this company in Montreal that's built a greenhouse on the top of a warehouse building. And it's all hydroponic agriculture in the middle of Montreal. And the idea being that, grow the food where it's needed, where you're going to eat it. And by putting it on the top of this already existing warehouse building, you capture a lot of the heat already. Like the building already has a certain amount of heat. So like the cost of running it is lower, and the cost of transportation of all the food. People can subscribe to the service and you get fresh veggies picked and then delivered to your house. It was quite interesting.
Okay, I love that. I always thought that was the technology of the future that's going to change things. But there's more to it than that, and we'll get to that in a second. But I love that. I was really moved when I saw that. Up in the north part of Canada, like right in the Arctic, where hardly anyone lives, and it's really cold, and there's no roads. You have to fly everything in, and the food is incredibly expensive and not fresh, and there's not a lot of healthy food because the vegetables don't make it up there without costing a fortune and being, half dead. So, yeah, when they were doing that up there in like a container, like a shipping container, I thought, wow, that's a tremendous thing to do. And then you can run solar panels outside and wind turbines, small-scale wind turbines to power the LEDs. LEDs are a big change. We look at technology, how it's changing the world and improving climate. Well, LEDs was a big one. Mm-hmm. That sort of energy efficiency is really reduced the demand. The growing demand for electricity has slowed it down a lot better than if we didn't have LEDs. And when it comes to growing food, LEDs are fantastic because I don't know how I found this out, but I was reading about marijuana plants.
I wonder how.
I don't know why I have an interest in that, but they had, like recipes for specific color temperatures at different times of the year while you're growing this plant indoors in your closet.
Right.
Which I believe you could do in Canada now. You can grow like 3 plants in your closet. So you'll get mold in there, though. Yeah, and it was and you can fine tune the plants, the color temperature for the plant, and even change it throughout the day or the season, which I find cool. As a person who thinks that technology is a cool way to solve problems, that was very interesting to me. So, got another one, and this is regarding SaskPower and the government involvement in utilities. Michael says, the Saskatchewan government has a monopoly on the production and sale of electricity, so they end up subsidizing old technology. Free the market. Power from the people is the power to the people. Now, you would not find a more pro SaskPower, pro government utility person out there, and the reason is because they're not making profit. They're not charging you more than they need to. However, this is something we'll talk about later. I'm now questioning my devotion to Crown Corporation utilities because I think that they are getting in the way of the free market, because Seba's think tank here is saying that the best part of the clean energy revolution is that the free market's going to take care of it, but you have to get out of the way. Okay, so Engineered says, this is RE My Mountain Bike. Most e-bikes have that cruiser bike profile, but this NCM Prague, which is the one that I reviewed on our YouTube channel, retains the mountain bike hardtail design that I like. In my opinion, bikes in general should not be a form of transportation, but also be a form of exercise. The hardtail allows for great off-road trailing with the battery assist if needed, and I agree with that. I think I actually had range anxiety the other day with my e-bike because I forgot to charge the battery. But that was fine. It was fine. I got it down to 1. I was supposed to drain the battery once every 3 months and charge it to full. Not sure why. I imagine it's a battery management thing. So that's where we're at there. Go ahead.
All right, so another story here. They've started to deliver the Volkswagen ID3 cars in Norway. This is this story is a little August 28th.
It's a little August 28th?
It's a story from August 28th, but I still haven't really started to see any reviews from Norway. But that's interesting. They've finally started to deliver the Volkswagen ID3.
Did you see Elon Musk? I found it interesting that Volkswagen, he was in Germany looking at their new factory there and just sort of doing a PR sort of trip. And the Volkswagen CEO invited him over to Volkswagen. So they have their own airport, don't you know? Mm-hmm. So his private plane landed there and he drove around in, was it an ID3 or an ID4?
No, it was an ID3.
Yeah, and they videoed it. And what do you think of that? I mean, that's something we should be talking about. No, I think it's probably on our schedule to talk about anyway.
Yeah, well, Volkswagen, as we have mentioned, they do seem to be the one legacy automaker that's taking this the most seriously. They seem to have committed the most amount of cash. They have a new regime in place, which is separate from the Dieselgate regime. So, they're trying to set a new tone for Volkswagen. They seem to be pretty serious about making electric cars. They've said lots of nice things about Tesla, which is probably one of the reasons why Elon Musk went to go see them. And, it's... and then there was also a story... further story about the VW CEO recently drove the Tesla Model Y and had lots of nice things to say about that.
Yeah, I sure want a Model Y. I'm looking forward to the future when I can buy one cheap. You know, the thing about electric cars is a lot of them are losing their value, but the Teslas are not. And they're kind of like computers because there's always new tech that comes out to replace them. Like cars... Mm-hmm. Well, that's not true. Cars are getting new tech, and I actually was motivated to buy a new Prius because of the new safety features, such as emergency braking and lane keep assist. And I was thinking my son was going to start driving, and I was thinking, well, do I want, I was thinking, what happens if somebody dies? And I didn't go for the new tech, and it might have saved. This is like gets into your head, and so I've been thinking about that. So yeah, new cars have that sort of new safety features, but generally cars are cars. They're trying to squeeze every ounce of energy efficiency out of them they can, but they're not changing. Brian, the show on YouTube this week, we do have all of our shows are archived there. We only have a few shows. We're now on 29. They're all there on YouTube. However, this show will only have the first half hour up on YouTube, and you'll be able to see me from my bedroom trying to do a show. So it'll be the first half hour, and you'll miss the lightning round. The lightning round is coming up later in the show where I put a plethora of clean energy headlines, throw them at Brian and see how he responds. It's exciting, and Brian, the listeners and now viewers are clamoring for it.
Okay, can we get to my favorite segment?
Sure.
The green energy pet peeves?
Okay, we don't have an intro for it. So
what?
No. You could have given me some heads up. I could have made one. Okay, clean energy pet peeves. Here's Brian.
That's perfect. We don't need more than that.
Okay.
This is kind of a dumb one, but electric cars don't need a radiator, so they tend to not have a grill. So where we live in the world, if you drive your car on the highway in the summer, you get a lot of bugs splattered on the car. And I've discovered that with an electric car, it's more than twice as bad because there's no radiator, there's no grill at the front. It's insane how many bugs get splattered on the front of the car, and it takes forever to clean them off. So that's my green energy pet peeve.
So you were trying to clean bugs off from your trip? Was that right?
Yeah, and I go to the car wash and I spray on you spray on this bug remover first, but it's not powerful enough. So I did a search on the internet, and the system I came up with is you use a bounce dryer sheet and some water, and that has just enough abrasion to get the bugs off, but doesn't wreck your paint. So it still takes a long time, and it's a pain in the ass, but that system seems to work.
Bounce dryer sheets are used for so many weird things. We use them to keep mice out of the camper in the winter.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Like, what's in those things? Do I want to know? Maybe I don't. Don't send us letters. I don't want to know, because my wife uses them all the time with her clothes and the kids' clothes. I only wear athletic gear being an athlete, and we can't use those with clothes that are meant to breathe. So, Brian, I'm going to get now to Tony Seba's appearance on the BBC Business radio program, and I'm just going to start it off with this.
To produce 1 kilo of protein was $1 million. Today, it's $100 per kilo. We estimate that the cost will drop to about $10, so we'll match the cost of cow proteins by 2024, 2025.
So 80% of cheeses right now, 80 to 90% of cheeses in the world have precision fermentation used instead of the natural fermentation, which is,
really?
Yeah. And even for some French cheeses, most not French cheeses, but of course the BBC had to ask about that.
There were 10 experts, I think, invited along, and 8 of them were from very big and august institutions, large oil companies, departments of government, big NGOs. And they all pretty much had the same straight line forecast for the adoption of solar, renewables and electric vehicles, forecasting maybe 10, 20% adoption by 2050. And I'll never forget Tony getting up and saying, look, this isn't how disruption works. It's not slow and linear. It's an S-curve. This thing is over by the early 2030s.
So, yeah, there was this big government and industry meeting with all these tycoons, and Tony Seba was there. That's how he met his partner. That's his partner there. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, and I've lost my note on him. But, yeah, and the idea is that this is how the world thinks. And I remember a few years ago, these predictions for 2050 being 1% EV adoption. Mm-hmm. Literally, by the International Energy Agency and things that really guide the energy markets. And look at where we are now. In some countries, it's, I don't want to use extreme countries necessarily, like Norway, where it's like over 50%, but there are some countries that are 6.7 and 8% already. And that is really going to accelerate in this decade. So he's saying that a lot of their precision fermentation stuff is going to be cost parity by 2024, 2025 in that area. And that means that agriculture and the emissions from it will start to shift. We'll start to see shifting this decade. Question I had, Brian, I don't know if you have any comments, but the question I had was, and I think you brought this up vaguely last week, was what about things like steak? What they're doing now is they're using enzymes to give the blood taste. It's the same. It is actually the same enzyme in a cow, except it's artificially made. And what they're saying is that enzyme will be made cheaper. But now you have to have texture for it, so you put it with plant-based foods, right? Well, they're working. That's only one half of the story. They're working on actually making fake meat with muscles and tendons in the lab that will eventually be cheaper too. And I have a clip here.
So how far away are we from having a nice, juicy cut of steak made this way?
So there are 2 main technologies that are going to disrupt steaks. One is precision fermentation itself, so that like Impossible Burger, you make a protein and you add it to, for instance, plant-based substrate, and you make a burger. So about half of cow sales are actually ground beef. And that's the part that is going to be disrupted soon. What is not easy to grow in the lab is things like ligaments and muscles to give the texture of the actual beef. The other technology is cellular agriculture or cell-based meats. You grow in a lab the whole meat. In that, in our estimation, it's going to take more like 6, 7, 10 years to be ready from a technology perspective and also from a cost perspective.
Yeah, so is that news to you? Because I wasn't following that part of the story.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Certainly ground beef is easier to replicate than a steak, but also, yeah, if it's 50% of the market, that's even if they don't get to the steaks, that's still a huge disruption.
It is. That alone would, and especially, it's incredible. And I know people might be starting to getting sick of us talking about it, but it's a big deal, and it certainly affects the climate.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, we're going to have to say goodbye to our YouTube viewers. Be sure to check out the rest of the podcast where we'll have the lightning round and all kinds of other wonderful things.